The dust swirled, thick as unshed tears, around Jedediah Blackwood's polished boots. He stood on a makeshift platform, a rough crate before the assembled townsfolk of Redemption, a terrified Navajo girl beside him, her wrists bound with rawhide. Her eyes, wide and dark as a desert night, darted like trapped finches, never resting, absorbing every detail with a desperate, silent intensity. She was barely a woman, her silence a shroud heavier than any blanket, a stillness born of horrors unspoken. Blackwood's voice, a gravelly rasp accustomed to barking orders, cut through the midday heat. "All right, folks, what am I bid for this asset?" He gestured dismissively, as if she were a lame mare. Found her wandering. No papers, no tribe claiming her. Mute as a stone. But she's got hands, can work. Someone give me $1, just to be rid of her. A ripple of unease, quickly suppressed by fear or apathy, moved through the crowd. They were used to Blackwood's callousness, his greed, but this felt different, a new stain on the town's already tarnished soul. $1. The price of a human being, laid bare under the unforgiving sun. Men shuffled, their eyes avoiding the girls, while women clutched their shawls, whispering behind cupped hands, yet none spoke out against Blackwood, who thrived on their cowardly silence. A man, weathered as an old oak, leaned against the general store, his hat pulled low. Silas. He'd seen too much of the world's ugliness, carried its weight in the lines around his eyes. He watched, his stillness a stark contrast to the girl's trembling. He saw not an asset, but a reflection of a pain he knew intimately, the pain of the helpless. For a fleeting, terrible moment, the ghost of his lost daughter flickered in the girl's fragile form. Blackwood smirked. "Come now, don't be shy. $1? Surely one of you needs a new scullery maid? Or perhaps something quieter for the long nights?" His insinuation hung venomously. The girl flinched. Silas felt a cold rage stir, a spectre he thought long buried after the fire, after Sarah and little Tim, but some graves refused to stay closed. He pushed himself off the wall, his movement economical. Each step towards the platform was heavy. The crowd parted. He stopped before Blackwood, his gaze, when he finally lifted his head, like chips of winter ice. $1, Silas said, his voice quiet, yet it carried over the sudden hush. Blackwood blinked, surprised, then a greasy smile spread. Well. Silas. The hermit of Shadow Creek. Didn't figure you for this kind of acquisition, he chuckled, a dry, grating sound. Sold. To the quiet man for $1 silver. He shoved the girl forward. She stumbled. Silas caught her arm gently, his touch steady. He pressed the coin into Blackwood's palm, the metal cold. He looked at Blackwood, a silent promise of reckoning in his eyes. Then, turning, he led the girl away, his hand lightly on her arm, guiding her through the whispering, staring townsfolk. Someone muttered, "What's he gonna do with her?" Another, "He's taken her to the preacher's house." Indeed, Silas steered her towards the small, whitewashed church, the steeple a lonely finger pointing towards a distant heaven. The whispers followed, his marrying her. Marrying a mute savage he bought for $1. Today the words were laced with shock and condemnation. What had possessed Silas, the silent rancher, to do such a thing? Was it madness, or something else they couldn't comprehend? If you were standing in that dusty street, witnessing such a transaction, feeling the weight of that silent girl's fear, what thoughts would fill your mind? Would you see a monster in Silas, a savior, or simply a man driven by forces unseen? The preacher, Thaddeus, a nervous man with spectacles perched on his nose, had stammered through the briefest of ceremonies, his eyes darting between Silas's grim face and the girl's terrified, unblinking stare. The document he'd signed, witnessed by his flustered wife, Martha, offered a thin veneer of legality, a shield fragile as old glass, but perhaps, Silas prayed, strong enough to deter the wolves. Martha, whose kindness was a small, warm lamp in redemption, had pressed a bundle into the girl's hands, a worn but clean dress, a shawl, and bread. Her eyes held a flicker of understanding for the desperation in Silas's act. Now, at Silas's remote ranch, nestled in a valley shadowed by brooding mesas, the silence was different. It was the silence of isolation, of unspoken grief. The cabin was Spartan: a hearth, a table, 2 chairs, a cot in one corner, a larger bed in the other. Silas gestured to the cot. "That's yours," he said, his voice raspy. He didn't call her a wife, the word felt like a profanity. He had named her Ilara on the preacher's document, Vodstar in a language his mother spoke, a faint memory before the world turned to ash. Ilara, for the light he'd seen in her eyes, a light he was desperate to protect. She stood by the door, poised for flight, the bundle clutched like a shield. Her gaze swept the room, cataloguing every shadow, every escape. He saw the fear in her taut shoulders. He moved slowly, building the fire, slicing bacon. The smell of frying meat heightened her tension. He placed a plate of food on the table, then retreated, mending tack, the rhythmic pull of needle and leather a grounding task. Hours passed. She hadn't moved. He sighed. "You need to eat," he set the plate on the floor near her, then retreated. More silence. Then, a tiny rustle. He heard faint chewing. A small victory. That night, sleep eluded him. His mind replayed the day, Blackwood's sneer, Ilara's terror. Then, unbidden, smoke, flames, a woman's scream, a child's cry abruptly silenced. He closed his eyes, a muscle working in his jaw. He had failed Sarah, his Tim. The fire had taken them, and part of him. But looking at Ilara, he felt an ember of purpose. He would not fail again. This silent star, he would protect her. The marriage was a desperate lie. But the vow he'd made to himself was real. Could this place, a man like him, offer sanctuary? Or had he merely traded one cage for another in her eyes? The next morning, Ilara was gone from the cot. Panic seized Silas. Then he saw her, outside, by the small, struggling vegetable patch his wife had tended. She stood still, listening to a meadowlark. Her hands were clasped loosely. When she turned and saw him, fear flickered, but less potent. She didn't bolt. She looked at him, her dark eyes holding a question. He nodded, a silent greeting, then went about his chores, aware of her, a small, silent shadow. Later, he found she had eaten the bread Martha gave her. A small sign. He clung to it. The town would buzz. Silas, the widower, buying and marrying an Indian girl. Let them. Their judgment was distant noise. What mattered was the silent girl and the promise to his ghosts. Days bled into weeks under the vast, indifferent sky. Ilara remained a silent enigma, but her fear softened, smoothed by the quiet rhythm of the ranch and Silas's unobtrusive care. She no longer flinched when he entered, her eyes holding less terror, more a profound sadness. Unasked, she began to help with small chores, collecting eggs, sweeping the cabin. She had an affinity for the struggling garden, coaxing green shoots from parched earth with a patient Silas found humbling. He'd often see her there, her small hands tending plants, a figure of quiet diligence. She communicated through gestures, through the expressive depth of her eyes, a nod, a tilt of her head, a fleeting shadow of a smile. Silas, in turn, spoke little, but his actions conveyed reassurance. He left food, mended her worn shoes, kept the woodpile stocked. He never pressed her, offering silent companionship. One evening, a storm gathered, wind howling like a hungry wolf. Silas sat by the fire, oiling his rifle. Ilara huddled on her cot, watching the flames. The storm mirrored Silas's inner tempest. He found himself speaking, voice low, more to the fire than to her. "The raiders, they came at dawn," he began, words rusty. "Utes," they said, "wolves in men's skin. They wanted horses, supplies." I tried. His hand stilled. He saw it again, smoke, Sarah's fear, Tim hiding. They set fire to the barn, then the house. "Sarah told me to take Tim, run." "But I?" His voice broke. "I thought I could fight them." He looked at his hands, strong hands that had failed. They dragged her out. Tim, he ran to her. He couldn't go on. Silence, but for his harsh breathing and the wind. A touch on his arm, light as a leaf. Ilara stood beside him, her dark eyes filled with an impossible understanding, a shared sorrow. Her small hand rested on his forearm, a silent comfort. He saw not a child, but a soul who also knew profound loss. He didn't know her story, what horrors stole her voice, but they shared a common language of pain. This fragile peace shattered days later. Silas rode to Redemption for supplies, an unease gnawing at him. Leaving the store, a shadow fell. Jedediah Blackwood, flanked by 2 thugs. Blackwood's reptilian eyes raked Silas. "Well, Silas," he sneered. "Heard you set up house with my little runaway. Playing husband?" Silas's hand moved to his Colt. "She's not yours," Blackwood chuckled. "Everything on my land is mine if I say so. And that mute, she knows something. Where her people stashed valuables before he scattered, his eyes narrowed. She was with Navajos who had a run-in with my associates. Looking for an old silver mine. She's the only one who got away." Silas's blood ran cold. Blackwood believed Ilara was a key to treasure. "She doesn't speak. Oh, I have ways of making people talk," Blackwood said, his smile predatory. "I'll be by your place in a few days to collect my property. Have her ready. Or things get unpleasant." He tipped his hat mockingly. Silas stood frozen. The threat was clear. Blackwood was dangerous. Ilara was in his path. The sanctuary felt fragile. He had to protect her. He would not let the past repeat. This time, he would not be too slow. The air at Shadow Creek grew thick with unspoken dread. Silas moved with grim intensity, fortifying the cabin, checking his rifle and Colt, stockpiling ammunition. Ilara watched, her eyes wide, knowing. She had seen the shift in him, the hardening of his jaw, his gaze constantly scanning the horizon. She understood the fragile peace was about to shatter. She did not flee. Instead, a new resolve settled in her. She anticipated Silas's needs: water, a steady fire, her small presence a quiet counterpoint to his coiled tension. She took to sitting by the window, a silent sentinel. Silas had tried to explain, "Blackwood. Coming. For you." He tapped his chest. "I protect." Her response was a solemn nod, then she touched his arm, her eyes conveying not fear, but a strange, fierce loyalty that struck him. It was the loyalty of one survivor to another. The attack came in the brazen light of late afternoon. 3 riders, Blackwood in the lead, his face a mask of arrogant certainty. They reined in their horses a short distance from the cabin. "Silas!" Blackwood's voice boomed. "I'm here for what's mine. Send out the girl, and maybe I'll forget you harbored stolen property." Silas stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely, his stance deceptively relaxed, his eyes chips of flint. "She's not property, Blackwood. And she's not going anywhere with you." Blackwood chuckled. "Always the hard way, eh?" He gestured to his men. "Go get her. If he gives you trouble, you know what to do." The 2 thugs dismounted, hands near their guns, advancing slowly. Silas stood his ground. He felt Ilara's presence behind him, just inside the cabin door. "Last chance, Silas," Blackwood called. "She ain't worth dying for." Silas's reply was soft, yet heavy with conviction. "Some things are." As the first thug reached the porch, Silas moved. Not frantically, but with swift, economical motion. The rifle fired from the hip, a blast sending the thug staggering back, clutching his leg, howling. The second man, startled, drew his pistol, but Silas was pivoting, his Colt appearing as if by magic. 2 shots slammed into the man's chest, throwing him backwards. It was over in seconds. Blackwood, face contorted with rage, fumbled for his own weapon. Silas was already moving, leaping off the porch, eyes blazing with righteous fury. He advanced on Blackwood, peacemaker steady. "It's over, Blackwood." Blackwood, cowardice warring with arrogance, finally drew, firing wildly. The shot kicked up dust. Before he could fire again, a piercing shriek cut the air, not terror, but rage. "Ilara!" She burst from the cabin, a cast-iron skillet held high. She brought it down with all her might on Blackwood's outstretched gun arm. A sickening crack. Blackwood screamed, pistol clattering away. He clutched his broken arm, face pale. Silas was on him instantly, gun to Blackwood's temple. "You came for a girl," Silas growled. "But you found a man ready to defend his own. And her stronger than you imagined." Just then, horses approached. Sheriff Brody, alerted by Martha, who had seen Blackwood ride out, armed and malicious. Brody took in the scene, downed thugs, whimpering Blackwood, resolute Silas, and Ilara, panting, skillet in hand, eyes blazing. The sheriff nodded. "Looks like you handled this, Silas. Seems redemption owes you its thanks." He and his deputy took the wounded and Blackwood into custody. As they rode away, Ilara slowly lowered the skillet. Her chest heaved. She looked at Silas, a tremor running through her. And then, she spoke. Her voice raspy, hesitant, but the words clear. "He hurt my people," 3 words. The first he had heard her utter. A testament to her pain, her resilience, her courage. The silence that descended upon Shadow Creek after Sheriff Brody departed was profound, yet different. Not fear or grief, but the quiet hum of aftermath. Ilara stood before Silas, the skillet at her feet, her chest still rising and falling. "He hurt my people," she had said. The words, few and halting, hung in the air, a bridge across the chasm of her silence. Silas looked at her, truly seeing not just the rescued girl, but the fierce, resilient young woman who had found her voice in conflict. A slow warmth spread through him, a feeling absent since before the fire. "Hope. They are gone now, Ilara," he said gently, using the name that now felt truly hers. "Blackwood won't hurt anyone again," she nodded, her dark, luminous eyes searching his. A question there, a vulnerability. What now? He knew their journey together was entering a new chapter. The sham marriage, a shield of desperation, had forged a genuine bond. He knelt, eye level with hers. "You are safe here, Ilara," he said earnestly. "For as long as you want. This is your home too, if you choose it." A single tear traced a path down her dusty cheek, then another. Not sorrow or fear, but release. She reached a hesitant hand, touched his weathered cheek, fingers light as a moth's wing. Then, another word, softer, a question and statement, "Silas." He covered her hand with his. "I'm here, Ilara." News of Shadow Creek spread through redemption. Shock and condemnation turned to grudging respect, then admiration. They saw Blackwood's evil and Silas's stand. They heard of the girl's bravery, her first words. Sheriff Brody ensured the town understood Silas acted from protective honor, not madness. The cowardly crowd found its voice, condemning Blackwood, offering quiet support. Martha, the preacher's wife, became a frequent visitor, bringing provisions and gentle conversation, patiently encouraging Ilara. Slowly, Ilara spoke more, telling of her village, the attack, her escape, the terror that stole her voice. With each word, trauma fell away, like dead leaves revealing new growth. She began to smile, shyly at first, then brighter, transforming her face. She learned to laugh, a sound Silas found precious. Silas, too, healed. His ghost still whispered, but fainter now, overlaid by Ilara's recovering speech, their shared warmth. The ranch, once a monument to grief, felt like home. He taught Ilara to read and write. She shared the quiet wisdom of her people, their connection to the land. Their marriage evolved into deep companionship, a partnership of souls finding solace in each other. Respect transcended any document. Whether it would blossom, time would tell. For now, they were 2 survivors, tending a fragile garden of new beginnings. Silas sought to save a life and saved his own. His redemption was not public absolution, but quiet mending, reflected in Ilara's returning light and his own newfound peace. Their story became a quiet legend in redemption, a parable of courage, compassion, and the human spirit's power to heal. And so, we leave them, Silas and Ilara, their futures uncertain but no longer bleak. What do you believe is the truest form of redemption? Is it found in grand gestures, or in the quiet, everyday acts of kindness and protection? Consider their journey, and ask yourself, where does true strength lie, in dominance, or the courage to defend the vulnerable? Ponder this. And if their story has moved you, be sure to look for more tales of courage and redemption, and perhaps share this one with someone who needs to hear it.